The Celtics beat the Blazers like a normal contender, finally. How can the Celtics consistently reach their ceiling? All that and more on First to the Floor.
Who's going to be first to the floor here? And it was Marcus Smart, as he usually is.
Brown drives, layup off the glass.
That's not the first time we've seen a superstar in green and white sacrifice the body.
Garnett knocked away.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of First to the Floor. I'm joined by a very special guest, Nate. You may know him from Twitter, YouTube, prolific Twitter user. If you're not already following him, you got to get on it. Nate, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Jake. Thanks for having me on today, man.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Appreciate you having you on. I mean, Nate has some serious skills when it comes to clipping videos, getting them up like in real time, and giving us the numbers. Really great follow on Twitter. So we'll chuck his stuff in the show notes after the show. But great to have you. Look, let's just dive into. We'll touch on the Blazers game. We don't need to go too deep into this one. It wasn't exactly the most complicated game to kind of analyze it. I think the Blazers are pretty terrible, especially when there's no Anthony Simons out there. But look, I think we all kind of needed just a no frills blowout. Jason Tatum, 30 minutes. Al Horford, 24 minutes. No one had to play the fourth quarter. It was fine. It was good to see. I think everybody was on eggshells around that third quarter. The Blazers cut it to about 14. And it's like, are we going to do this again? But no, we tightened the screws and we didn't look back. How'd you feel about the Blazers game, Nate?
So I was actually at a concert that night. Was watching some JID at the House of Blues. Pretty great show. But
All right.
got home, watched it the next morning, and I totally agree. That was just a nice, nothing too crazy about it. Just a good feel-good win. Vibes restored a little bit, I would say. Again, like you said, the Blazers are nothing special, especially without Ant. I mean, you're relying on Grant and like Cam Reddish to carry the bulk of your offense aside from Dame, and that's just not enough. But really, yeah, that just a win. That's all they needed. Just a nice, normal win. No one gets hurt. We don't need any super big time 45-point performances to scrape out the W. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, we didn't need any 45-point performances, but if we did, I think there was one in there. Like Tatum was looking as good as he's kind of looked all year. What was his stats? 11 for 17, 6 for 10 from three, to go for 30 points on 17 shots with only 2 free throw makes. Like that's when that's an efficient night at the office. And so he didn't play in the Cavs game after the double overtime performance in against New York, which I think was the right decision. I personally would have probably rested Jalen as well, but Jalen had maybe one of his best games until the last 5 minutes of the Cavs game with the playmaking, getting to the rim, kind of doing it all. But this kind of question about Tatum and load management and his minutes, like it was hard to kind of separate how bad was the Blazers defense and how spry and how fresh did Tatum look, because he looked awesome, like getting to the rim, splitting doubles, the three ball working, like he had his legs under him. It's hard to kind of, figure out against a defense like the Blazers, how much of it was rest and how much of it was the Blazers defense. How have you felt about the way that, Missoula and the team have managed Tatum's minutes? And then we can maybe have a look at how we managed Tatum's minutes for the last 15 minutes of the season. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a funny topic because I don't know how in charge Joe and Brad are of managing Tatum. I think Tatum is his own boss. We saw it a few weeks ago where they sat him down for one game and Brad came on and said, yeah, he wouldn't be playing the next game. And then there he was just showing up.
Yeah.
You'd have to tie this guy down for the entire night, keep him locked in a room for him to not want to go play basketball. And honestly, I admire that. But if it means more performances where he, like you said, looks spry, bouncy, has his shot working like that Blazers game, I would be very, very happy if they could, get him a little bit more rest, especially down the stretch here.
Yeah, look, you want your superstar to play as many games as possible, as many minutes as possible. But I think there is a happy middle ground, and sometimes these guys just can sometimes be, their own worst enemy. Like you can see, he stacks up minutes, and there'll be a certain game where he's not getting back on defense as much, or the drive to the rim, he's losing the handle, things like that. And I think it was interesting. Paul George, as pretty much every player on the NBA starts to get their own podcast. Uh, Paul George was on his own podcast, I believe, talking about load management because the Clippers are the poster boys for load management and drawing the ire of the Barclays and the Shaqs of the world. And he was kind of talking about how it's not up to them. It's up, the coaches and the management, they come to them and say, you're not playing tonight. And it's hard for, I think, as Celtics fans to kind of reconcile that because we know that Brad's trying to get him not to play. We know that the management and the training staff are like, you probably shouldn't be playing. And our guy is like, I'm playing. And there's not a lot they seem to be able to do about it, which I think is another, there's plenty of differences between Paul George and Tatum, but the willingness and to put his body out there night in, night out is commendable and speaks to actually them having control versus the teams. That being said, I think it will end up kind of being like, Tatum's going to end up playing what, 70-ish, 72 games this year. Like, what does it look like if he plays 68? Right. I think when I checked this morning, he was 4th in the league in total minutes. None of the other MVP candidates are kind of like in that top 10 range of total minutes. Like, Giannis, he rarely gets above the 34-minute range, similar to Jokic, similar to Embiid. And whether it was mental exhaustion or physical exhaustion in the finals last year, like he's spoken about how that was a factor.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we're talking about trying to win a title, keeping Tatum fresh, like we know he can play 45. We know he can. He'll play 48. Like it's not a problem for him. But can we get him playing at a level that we saw in round 1 against the Nets? Game 6 against the Bucks, the Blazers game, the Cavs game that we had coming out the break as well. How can we get more of those performances and less of the 6 for 18 performances?
Yeah, I mean, I think rest is, like you said, the best probably way to approach that. It's crazy because we're already getting so much from this guy that I have a hard time asking him for more. But I do think if you could find more games for him to take off, if you could actually hold on to more leads so that they could rest him, in fourth quarters, that'd be nice too. And I think that would be nice from mostly just a defensive standpoint. I feel like he gives so much effort on offense, and as great of a defender as he is at his peak form, we don't always see that night to night where he is like really taking those matchups personal. So I think that's where it would really shine if they could, spare him some rest days. So I don't know. How did they get through to this guy? Maybe as he starts to get older, he feels like, okay, yeah, I got to take this rest more seriously. But right now, I guess if he's fine with playing, I'm cool with it too. He is an Iron Man.
I know, right? Like, and it sounds cool on an off day to be like, we should maybe rest him a day, or we should maybe try and keep those minutes down. But then Tatum's on the bench and there's 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and the lean's down to 12, and you're like, you know what I could really use? Just Jason Tatum coming off the bench just a little bit. I think it's a discipline point of view from even Joe. Just get those rests when he comes out in the first, he comes out in the third. Can we get him out a little earlier or hold him out a little longer? So maybe it's not necessarily the total games played. It's just, can we get him down from 37 minutes a game to like 35, and that cumulative impact of those minutes? Because I think from wins and losses perspective, if you take down the minutes just a tiny bit, I think that the those minutes are going to be slightly more impactful. And I think even when Tatum's not playing his best, he's still an impactful player just of the gravity and the playmaking. And even when he's not defending at his peak, still, a positive wing defender in the NBA. So I think maybe it's just especially as we get towards like these last 15 games here, that's what I would love to see. Just like ramp it down a little bit, especially with these squishy defenses coming up,
Mm-hmm.
like Hawks tomorrow, Kings coming up. There's like we don't have a lot of like tough defenses outside of like the Bucks, and I think we played the Raptors twice in like the last couple of games of the season. But outside of that, most of the defenses are pretty squishy, so that should hopefully help alleviate some of the load as well. We'll see. I'm sure they're having these conversations behind closed doors, so we'll have to see how we go tomorrow, or just blow them out, as you said. Let's just get the 20-point leads.
Always. Yeah, I'd always like that. I would add though, I totally agree with you. Try and find it more times during the game that you can, scale back his minutes a little bit per night. And I think it just, as you were saying that, it kind of occurred to me again that the loss of Gallinari kind of is a ripple effect for that at the beginning of the season, because he was a guy that could sort of step in at that similar position on the forward wing spot, and they could, for minutes at a time, they could get some go-to scoring ability, some scoring punch from him. And they sort of weren't able to find that guy this year that could fill in for that. They've got Sam, but Sam, you don't go to Sam when you need a bucket. Muscala is obviously not that guy either. So I think that hole is a little bit that's a underrated reason too why he's really being kind of forced to play as much as he is.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And something that we've spoken a little bit about is just getting Derek's minutes up. I feel like of all the players, you don't want to ride anyone too hard, but Derek he is that guy that can do it all. I don't think he's missed a single game this year, despite just like losing teeth and breaking his neck and like losing an eardrum, like another Iron Man. And maybe running some more 3-guard lineups. Like I'm kind of getting closer to wanting to, lean into going smaller with this group versus, I like the double big lineup, but how much are we actually going to be able to see that now? I know we're getting closer to Rob coming back again, but do we just kind of lean on Derek and Marcus and Brogdon minutes in order to bring the minutes of Tatum, Al, and Rob down? Because I think even when they are small, they're just like so hard to deal with on both ends, but especially on offense when you got Marcus and Derek and Brogdon just constantly driving and kicking and getting the ball moving. That's going to get the offense to a totally fine place when it comes to the regular season.
Yeah, you really don't have to convince me about more Derek White minutes. I'm all for that. The 3-guard lineup is one I was really interested in when they brought Brogdon here, as just a way to kind of make these lineups make sense with the guard depth they have. And I don't feel like we've seen it as much. They could try to explore that more. And I think just finding the right way to play with that unit would be big. Just push the pace and, drive kick game would just be incredible with those three. I feel like there's something there that's a little bit untapped at this point.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we haven't seen enough of. We're kind of running out of time. You would think we would have seen it even more. Rob's gone down, but the emergence of Sam, finding his shot again. I mean, he was again crazy in the Blazers game. Some of these shots he's hitting, which is no airspace, getting those leads out. So maybe that's just where Joe likes to go, get a bit more size. But yeah, we're all anytime someone says more Derek White, I think 99% of Celtics fans are for that. Speaking of more Sam, that's kind of come to the detriment of kind of public enemy number one among Celtics fans at the moment. That's Grant Williams, friend of the podcast, Big Gill. We had Grant's dad on earlier in the year. It's been a rough little week here for Grant between the Cavs game and the missed free throws. So after the Cavs game, we have a lot of spin, some reports kind of leak out about Grant and his injuries. So Jared Weiss reported that he's dealing with an elbow injury with some ligament inflammation right after the Cavs game. But then in the Blazers game, he's not playing, which kind of, makes you think maybe there is a real injury. But then he comes out and plays in garbage time and he's just launching from three. We got videos of him practicing hook shots against Derek White. And I'm like, if there is an actual, elbow injury, are we seeing him do these sorts of things? Should they be just limiting him if they don't need him for a specific game? How much are you buying into like kind of the backlash of the Grant stuff?
I'm in a weird point with Grant, honestly, because we have all seen what this guy does and what he means to this team at his very best. I don't know how much of his very best we've seen in this calendar year, which is unfortunate. And, what he did last season in the playoffs for a majority of it, it gives me this piece of faith that he is still, capable of getting back to what he is. But like I said, this year, I don't know how much we've seen of that. And as it comes to the injury, I feel like inclined to believe most players when injury stuff comes out. The timing of it's just really unfortunate in the midst of a struggle. So it could sound like an excuse. What I did see was some people bringing up that the injury did first pop up like several weeks before that report came out on an injury report. So that makes it feel a little less like an excuse to me. But at the same time, like you said, when I saw the skyhook video, I was like, we got some inflammation in the shooting elbow. Maybe we don't do a skyhook competition,
Yeah. Let's not film the skyhook competition.
Sure. Yeah. It was
Let's not post
it felt like setting him up a little bit. I will say
Yeah.
that.
I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect between the social media teams and what's happening, because right after the Cavs game as well, there was like the Celtics posted like this graphic of Grant Williams like hype. I forget what the point of the post was, but it was like,
I think
please
it was a
read
game day post, like
game day
announcing
post.
the game for the day.
Just please read the room. You're just asking to have to turn off replies or hide replies. Like, and I think, we definitely believe in the ceiling of Grant. I think, when you talk about trying to get back to the finals, you have to try and restore confidence in Grant when it comes to both the Sixers and the Bucks matchup. He plays really well in those matchups defensively. It's just the reality of the situation. And so you want that confidence to come back. You need that three ball to get going again. It's just, these contract years are tough. And I feel for the players, especially when it comes to restricted free agency. Like, yes, maybe, the leaking of the report, I do tend to think that the injury is real. How bad it is, we don't know. But like the timing of it just felt like it's, all kind of tied to this contract stuff, leaking out how much he wants to get paid. And it's been crazy. Like, this is like the most drama that the Celtics have had all season. And it's like, compared to the rest of the NBA, whether it's a Kyrie, a KD, a Luka, like how many teams have had Ja Morant this week as well. Like, the Celtics and the Bucks are like the lowest maintenance, contenders, it feels like in years. Just as literally as I'm saying, I think this is the first year in maybe Tatum and Jalen's career since like that rookie year that we haven't had to have the can the Jays play together discourse, which is why we're grasping at straws and we're talking about Grant Williams so much, which is probably a good thing, right?
Yes, when your biggest news is that two of your deep bench role players might be a little bit upset about their role or worried about how much they're getting paid in the off season, that's perfectly fine with me. I would say maybe let's limit the number of articles we're writing about them. I mean, do we need this right now? I don't think so. I think that was like the third or fourth Grant Williams article that I've seen in the last like week or so. Maybe we don't need that right now.
Yeah. And look, maybe this is as much, I was going to say media in general, but we're talking about it as well on this podcast. So enough with Grant. Let's just be thankful as Celtics fans that the drama and the chaos this year has been kept to a minimum, and the discourse can mostly just be about the basketball on the court. Speaking about the basketball on the court, some of the frustration, I think, over the past, since the All-Star breaks ended and even going back to late January. The offense has been relatively inconsistent, and Eric Weist, amazing, the guest on the podcast, he was recently on the Ringer NBA show talking draft. Would really recommend following him. He had this great Twitter thread I'm going to pull up here, and we'll read out his kind of assessment of the Celtics specifically on offense. Been thinking of a way to articulate my thoughts on the Celtics' season-long struggles with consistency. Here's my take. The actual offensive strategy is predicated on 5-out spacing and using the threat of the three to create space of drives and off-ball movement. The goal isn't to take as many threes as possible, but to generate more high-efficiency attempts on the opposition within the flow of the offense. There is a distinct difference between these two things. Missoula has stated innumerable times that improving shot drive reads is paramount, and it's easy to surmise that he equates not getting bored with the details with working for great shots, which intuitively includes non-threes. When the team is playing their best, this balance is well struck. The issue is they tend to settle for the shot in key situations too often instead of working to create the advantage through drives and movement. The further they drift from the balance, the more Tatum tries to take over in order to assert control in a way he has confidence in. That's human nature. Motion principles are far less familiar and can lead to turnovers in bunches when rhythm is off. See the Warriors' evolution. Unfortunately, unlocking Tatum's top game is currently predicated on motion principles like Golden State, not pick and roll ISO like Luka, LeBron, etc. The heliocentric club, the latter being mass marketed as the superstar norm to conform to. The overall success of the team and seeming ability to flip a switch to get back to winning makes these marginal lessons harder to internalize. They are encountered a personal familiarity, team prototypes, media narrative, and career achievement. There's a bit more to it. I really recommend going to read it. Nate, I'm sure you had a read through of that one. Are there any main takeaways you had from that thread? Great thread from Jared Weiss, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. I would say just totally spot on. It's something that I always feel with this team. Like he said, when they are hitting that balance, everything just starts to look good. It starts flowing. But when the ball movement stops, when the player movement slows down, it's like that's not focusing on the details. The details are when we can get that ball moving from side to side, because the biggest thing about this team is that they have so much talent that they put on the floor. So you want to take advantage of that by getting teams in rotation. And then when they're in rotation, you've got guys like Brogdon, you've got guys like Jalen Smart, whoever it is that can make a play when the defense is collapsing and rotating. So I just think that when they're doing that, they are ridiculously hard to cover. But it feels like they're playing into defense's hands when they start to slow things down and, maybe run one set, one pick and roll, whatever it may be. And that is one of my just bigger complaints with them. When they're on script, things look so good. But when they start to slow down a bit and kill that clock, it can be a bit frustrating to watch because you know how good they can be when they're fully maximizing that offensive scheme.
Yeah, I think it can be a case of old habits just die hard. It can be, these guys are humans. They've been, taught certain ways to play and practice certain ways to play their whole career. And at that point about the mass marketed superstar and kind of, the Luka, the LeBron, the Harden, these guys are supposed to have the ball in their hands and create plays for everybody else, which is so interesting to me because the most successful kind of team of these, the Tatum and Jalen, when they were, entering the league, the most successful team in the NBA was the Golden State Warriors. And it's like they play this, this is what Joe and Brad have been, and going back to the Spurs as well, the beautiful game, right? Like that's what they've been trying to ingrain in these guys for years and years. And it is getting better. Like there's no question that we have seen improvements. It's just they want to go back to, especially when they slow it down, and you get tired. When you get tired, that's when old habits start to creep in. And I just don't think it's in Jalen and Jason's natural nature. I think that they would agree that Tatum loves talking about making the right play, getting the right read. Some of his best games are when he's just playing in the flow of the offense. I think he's similar to KD in that way. You can kind of drop him into any lineup, any situation, and he can play off ball, on ball. Especially earlier in the season, we were seeing, and we're still seeing it relatively consistently. But that first kind of 6 to 8 weeks where it was, he was coming off screens and cutting, and you were finding him for backdoor cuts, all that kind of stuff. We're not seeing quite as much of it. And I think some of it can be explained by just the 82 game regular season, and playing this type of offense is both physically difficult and mentally difficult when it's just not your natural way of playing.
Yeah, I think to me when they get into that slow the game down, run a single, pick and roll, spread the floor, maintain the spacing, whatever it may be, they can run a simple offense that still involves some type of movement and misdirection, because when they do that, it just feels like it's allowing the defense to stay set, not put any pressure on them, and just rely on the abilities of the Celtics one-on-one talent, which is sort of geared towards that heliocentric comment about superstars. And like that thread said, that is not exactly where Tatum or the Celtics are at their best. It's when they've got, they're running a stagger screen for Tatum. Tatum comes off, gets the ball, somebody's rolling to the rim like that. I think it's just that simple, is to stay with those things. And part of me wonders how much of that is Joe giving them some room in those moments to try and control that game for themselves, and that's what they default to, because there's been comments in the past from the players and others about how Joe can be kind of hands off at times and just let them work through these things and learn. And I do wonder if that's the case here. It's, if he calls a play, we kind of see how those can go, whether it's an end of game scenario, they call a timeout, they get a great look like against the Sixers where Tatum comes off from behind half court, gets that game winner. So it's moments like that where I do wonder, when they start to revert to those things, is that self-inflicted? Is that something that stems from the coaching staff? Because part of me doesn't believe that it is. I would assume they're being taught some better habits there.
Yeah, I'm sure they're getting back to the film room the next day, and and Joe's like, "What are you doing here? What are you doing here?" And we're starting to see Joe get a little more pissed off. Like he dropped a couple S-bombs in the about defensive rebounding the other day. So look, yeah,
that's what happens when that interim tag gets taken off.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, less PG-13 now. Yeah, so I'm have no doubt that they're getting, and they're probably believing it. Like, yeah, why are we getting down and just dribbling on the side? Why are we not getting down and getting a Marcus Tatum screen, a Derek Jalen screen? Like, you can just hit that one action and then flow from there. Like, you can strike a balance of being up 12 with 6 minutes to go and slowing the clock down, but also then playing fast and purposeful into an action with 12 seconds to go on the shot clock, as opposed to 16 seconds to go on the shot clock, right? Like, it's just, and it's the fourth quarter, right? I think I was listening to Off the Pike this morning, podcast on the Ringer, and had some good numbers on their pace stats in, first three quarters, they're above league average, near the top in a couple quarters of pace. And then in the fourth quarter, 27th in the league when it comes to pace, which like 100% matches the eye test, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, you should bleed the clock when you're up 15 points with 6 minutes to go. But there is there's something in between what the Celtics are doing when they start getting into their actions with 9 seconds to go on the shot clock, and it's like a Tatum ISO, and like it's a half screen from whoever, and you end up with like a terrible, contested shot with 2 seconds to go. So I'm sure, and it's a good point, like how much, is letting them play through things. So when you look at getting to the playoffs, is Joe going to like be tighter on that? And that's what we don't know. And that's like part of the unknown of going into this playoffs, is what are we going to see come playoff time? I do have confidence, like Brad being in the building, right? Like these guys, Joe's a humble guy. I know you watched the KG Pierce Showtime stuff, right? Like,
great, yeah.
I mean, like if you're a Celtics fan and you haven't watched the Showtime KG and Pierce part one, can't wait for part two.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't watched that, you got to go check KG and Pierce coming back to the Garden. I'm pretty sure Paul was just the highest man in Massachusetts when he pretty much when he goes anywhere. He's hilarious. But yeah, like Joe's willing to learn and get, get input from around him. And so to have Brad there, one of the greatest, playoff coaches, I thought, in the league, I think it can only be a value add. So I wonder if they'll have a little bit of a shorter lease when it comes to playoff. And then also just this team in general, similar to that thread said, like they have kind of showed that they're kind of a flip the switch team, which you don't love from a team that hasn't won a title. But like they've won so many games since they've come in the league. Like outside of the Warriors, they have won the most games in the NBA over the past like 6 years. And so you kind of understand it from a human perspective. Like we understand what to do long season, but like you just want to see them kind of just be a little bit more consistent, especially when it's like, okay, well, we blew that lead against the Nets. We just blew that lead against the Knicks. And then you got the Cavs game. So hopefully we can get a little bit more offensive consistency going here.
Yeah, there's totally a balance that we can find there where it's, yes, they'll shut down the effort a little bit as this long season's going on, but like you said, at the same time, we really shouldn't be blowing this many leads, and there is some easy fixes to that. So
yeah, we got a comment here, clean music lover in the chat here. We're gonna have to agree to disagree here. Our players don't have high basketball IQ, and I don't like his system, meaning Joe Mazzulla. Firstly, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate anyone leaving a comment. I think between Horford, Derek, Brogdon, like Marcus, like we have a bunch of high IQ players. It's you don't win deep into the playoffs without high IQ players. But I think that point about his system is interesting to me because I think a big part of the conversation on Twitter on Brad's system. Well, I'd have to agree to disagree on that one because it's quite similar to Joe's as well. It's just quick decision making, take open shots. The question of are we taking too many threes? And one of our favorite followers on Twitter, I know you guys going back and forth on Twitter a bit as well. Trey on Twitter, I know he's going to come on the pod at some point. He's got a new baby girl, so life's busy for him. But on the threes, 7 of the 10 highest teams in percentage of points in the paint are also bottom 10 offenses, while 5 of the highest 10 teams in percentage of points from 3 are top 10 offenses. Threes are good. It's 2023. Like I went back and had a little look as well, right? So, last season the Warriors won the NBA title. They were 3rd in the league in 3-point attempts. The year before, the Bucks won the title. They were 8th in 3-point attempts, and they're I think 6th this year. Like the Bucks take a lot of threes as well. 2020 is kind of the outlier. The bubble season, the Lakers won the title. They were 24th, but when you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, that can obviously be skewed. And also, you might not win a title if it's not in the bubble. And then the 2019 Raptors, 6th in the NBA in 3-point attempts. And before that, it's the Warriors dynasty. Obviously, they shot a lot of threes. And the Cavs, which is in the 16-17 season, which is like one of the like great offenses that has just been lost in NBA history because they are going against the Warriors, 2nd in the league in 3-point attempts. Like the best offenses in the NBA shoot a lot of threes. And Mazzulla is not saying, and again, back to Eric Weiss's thread, it's not take as many threes as you can. It's like if you're sticking to your principles and you're playing the right way, you're going to generate very high quality shots, not just from 3, but it's going to make your looks at the rim much better as well. And you saw it in the Blazers game. Obviously, the Blazers are going to look anyone's offense look pretty good, but when you need threes to open up the paint, and you need paint touches to open up the 3. Like all these things are connected, but the idea that too many threes when all the best offenses shoot a lot of threes, like it's just kind of nonsensical at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about they take so many threes. We saw the Knicks game where people use that as a prime example. Like they're shooting so much, they're shooting poorly, but sometimes they just miss. You could generate very good shots. That's what it's all about. If you're getting good shots, you should be taking those shots. That's bottom line. You should be taking them. You shouldn't pass up open corner threes that you generated off of, ball reversals, paint touches, whatever it is. But that is the other part of the conversation. You have to be generating those types of shots for me to fully be on board because, if it's just walk up, maybe one pass or right into a screen and pull up, sometimes most of the time I'm okay with that depending on who's shooting it, but at the same time, I think we don't need to see that every time one pass down shot, like yes, get into the offense and then there should really be no problems with it. If they're generating good looks, it's a make or miss league. A lot of the times they make them, that's part of. I know people don't like the whole math thing with Joe Mazzulla, but
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. A lot of these nights where they're making their threes, they're winning the game straight up. They are. So um, I don't know how people can really call for them to stop taking as many. We know what year we're in. We know what wins games. So the nights the Celtics aren't hitting threes, they're losing. Just it's that simple. But just generate good looks, and that should just be the end of that story. I'm surprised we're still talking about that this year.
I know, in 2023.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I think that kind of explains the offense. And if you guys want to go look at some of the numbers, like I just the teams that shoot. Sorry, before we move on, because I looked at this as well. Teams that shoot their highest percentage of their shots at the rim. So you want the Celtics to go to the rim, shoot more shots at the rim. These are the teams top 10 in percentage of their shots at the rim. Lakers, Thunder, good team. Rockets, Charlotte, Denver, good team. T-Wolves, solid team. Pelicans, Blazers, Magic, Pacers. That's the top 10, right? So outside of Denver, that's the only contender in the top 10 of their percentage of their shots at the rim. And part of that is because Jokic is Dumbledore and he just like gets wide open layups at the rim. So it's like, why would you not, right? All right.
I think another part of that is just as I'm hearing some of those teams, makes me wonder how many of them actually are good at shooting threes. That's part of it too. Like the Celtics are a good 3-point shooting team, so it makes sense that they take those looks. But I would say you had the Magic on that list, right? That doesn't scream excellent 3-point shooting team.
Yeah.
You got the Thunder, who is obviously a great offense there, but they have leaned into paint touches and drives more than pretty much any team I've seen. I tried to go through some stats the other day um, on NBA.com, and as far back as it goes, they generate like the most drives per game, as many years as NBA.com goes back. So that's one thing. They've really leaned into that, but I mean, none of those none of those teams really scream like excellent 3-point shooters. And if you're a great 3-point shooting team like the Celtics, it makes sense that you shoot as many as you do.
Someone who is an excellent 3-point shooter is, I think, he's become one of my favorite Celtics of all time. And it's Al Horford.
Mhm.
Like, I thought we got 2 days off here, and I was just kind of tossing around what we could talk about. And I feel like it's been lost this season how incredible Al Horford's shooting season has been and how great, like, of a weapon he has become. Like, it cannot be understated how good of a shooter he's been this year. Of all players taking at least 5 3-point attempts this year, Al Horford leads the league in 3-point percentage, 45.4%. He's now ticked slightly ahead of our good friend Malcolm Brogdon, 45.2, after Brogdon, don't know what happened to him again in the Blazers game. That was very weird. But since the All-Star break, Al Horford is averaging 15, 7, and 3 on 62.5% from 3 on 6.7 attempts per game. 70% of his shots are from 3. Like, the weapon that Al Horford's turned into, the best big man shooter in the NBA. It's not particularly close, even though Brook Lopez is having a good year as well. But what have you seen and what have you enjoyed from Big Al this year?
I have enjoyed a lot of things, but what came to my mind initially is how much fun I'm having watching every fan base that we face. They bring up, oh yeah, I mean Al Horford had to hit 6 threes, had to hit 5 threes tonight. Yep, there we go. Right there. It's every night now it feels like. I mean, he'll never do this again. Oh, Al Horford's got 5 threes again tonight. Like the problem with that is that they're leaving him wide open. On several occasions, I think it was the Sixers game the first time I heard something like that. I clipped all the threes and he's just Joel is deep in the paint, and Horford is wide open. These are not tough shots for a great 3-point shooter. But I mean, his transformation into what he is now is just it's very special. He came into the league obviously pretty great shooting touch regardless, but to really transform his game from what he was to a premier stretch big is I applaud that entirely. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the fact that we have him locked up for another 3 years on top of this, like there's a few guys in the NBA that are proving that you can play into your late 30s and early 40s, and it's tricky to kind of analyze where Al Horford is because I think it's pretty clear that he's coasting, especially on defense. Um, and then you look at a game like against the Warriors at home in Boston where he had 20 and 10 and was just like a menace on both ends. Like, that gear's kind of in there and you're like, you're happy that he's kind of saving that energy for the playoffs. But what he's turned into and what that kind of means for the Celtics from a team building perspective to have the fact that he's still the best big man on the Celtics, the most impactful, the most reliable at 30. Is he turned 37 yet? I don't think. He's still 36. The fact that he's still doing it at 36 is so impressive, and it's like kind of thank God because we'd be a little concerned if Al Horford wasn't still playing at this level because and I think Brad I think has done a pretty good job filling out the big man rotation this year. Like I think the process has been sound. We saw some Noah Vonleh. Blake Griffin's been solid. Cornette's been playing the best ball of his career. I know you had a great actually like video and thread about how Brad and Joe have turned Cornette into this kind of basically a different player at any point throughout his career. If you want to like touch on that quickly.
Yeah, that was me trying to make a video going through the Celtics performances this year and trying to grade them. And, coming into the year, I don't really feel like any of us had a good read on what Luke Cornette could do this year. I don't think most expected really anything. And regardless of what you think of his play, he has probably surpassed your expectations before the season. And it was really interesting breaking down the stats just of the complete and total flip that happened with his play style. They said, Luke, you are 7'2", get in the paint, please stop taking threes. And he is just dunking, he's rolling, he's catching lobs. And it's like, how did no one think of this sooner? Almost
Yeah.
like Luke Cornette should not be a stretch big. I'm sorry. But yeah, this change it's been great. I will say, I don't know if he's been I feel like he's lost it a little bit in these past few weeks. I don't think we've seen as much of the guy that we had early in the season. But he's still an NBA player. I'll say that. And they're not paying him anything. So it's definitely a win for what he is, but I would absolutely like an upgrade at that point, at that position at some point. So,
yeah, I think the reality is with Al's aging, as amazing as he's been, we father time undefeated. As amazing as LeBron is, like those injuries are starting to pile up for him. The fact that Al is the most durable, I know, and resting on the back to backs is like an absolute no brainer, and clearly seems to be working because he has barely missed a game outside of that. It will run dry eventually, and like we're just going to be playing the Rob game, I think, for his whole career. So how Brad addresses that in the offseason will be interesting. I think, Cornette can stick around, Blake can stick around, but like just having a deep rotation of options, I know, Fiondu Kabengele had a monster game in Maine. What do you have, like 28 and 20 today or something like that?
oh, yeah, and he dropped 20, yeah, something like that. Just
Yeah,
huge game. I was sort of hopeful that he could give us what
me
Luke
too.
given this year. After that summer league, I was totally on that
Oh,
bandwagon.
no
And
question. Because
I
I
don't
mean,
know
like,
what the plans are for him. Maybe they'll bring him up next year.
yeah,
Maybe he's spent this year getting, used to the system and they'll feel comfortable with that, which would be fine with me. But either way, I'd still probably want an upgrade if we can find something this summer.
yeah, yeah. Wouldn't shock
Yeah.
me if, like, because JD, what JD had a triple double today in Maine as well, right? So
I mean, as far as rookies go, he is a pretty crazy playmaker. He's like
yeah,
4th in the G League in assists per game, and I mean, that's really impressive, you know? There's a
I
lot of
think
veterans in
yeah,
that league too.
I think you can kind of see the writing on the wall a little bit. I mean, Pritchard, I would be surprised if he comes back the next year, and JD is kind of the perfect replacement for Pritchard as like a fourth guard and a guy that's probably not going to be upset with minutes. He's going to be happy that he's on that NBA salary, and
Mhm.
then um, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% on like the rules and the like. Will they have another year to sign Kabengele? Because I think part of why I think that they kind of went with Luke over Cab was just um, the erraticness maybe of Kabengele. Like he wants to block everything. He wants to jump for every rebound versus Luke's just probably going to play like his his variance is probably his range of outcomes is kind of
Yeah, you
more
can't
steady,
teach size either, you know? Like,
right?
he's 7'2", and at times he's I don't know how to say it, but he's easy to see why they would keep him out there. He can just be moldable to what
Yeah.
you need him to do. You know, he can protect the rim a little bit. He can catch lobs a little bit, and he's not going to try and overstep that. He's not going to do too much out there. Like Kabengele, he'll probably chase a few blocks. He'll probably be out of position. The few times we've played him, he looks like really kind of like young Rob in the way that he's just
Yes.
sort of like bouncing around out there. Positioning wise, kind of just looks like antsy. So yeah, I mean, Luke's been around too, so it makes sense that they would go with him. I was also kind of hoping we could get a little bit from Vonleh, but that was mostly because he's just a hometown guy. I was hoping he could stick
Yeah.
around here.
Hey, we did get a little bit from Vonleh.
We got a little
We
bit,
got
yeah,
a
we
little
did.
bit. We did. Look, if we go back, check the tape. He helped us get like a couple of those early wins, and we were like, look at this Brad guy. He's done it again. And
Mhm.
then really, if you told me that's what we got from Vonleh, he helped us get like 3 wins. That's probably all you can ask
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
yeah, we're kind of jumping around here, but like this it's a couple of days off. We're just cruising around in the chat here. Do you see us adding Begarin or Madar to the roster next year? Look, if you've been listening to this pod for a while, I'm a huge Begarin fan.
Mhm.
I kind of fell off the Madar bandwagon because he kind of bailed on, and we have so many like guards. I don't know exactly where Madar fits in, but I will say on Twitter the other day, someone I forget his name, who's actually kind of like seems to be locked in on the draft and stash stuff, was saying that he likes the Begarin and Madar pairing, and Madar's had a really good year with a bunch of like NBA prospects and stuff. So look, you never know how some of these NBA paths are going to go. I don't really see a path for Madar specifically because I don't see Brad bringing him in over someone like JD. Like when I saw Madar at Summer League, he's so skinny, and like
Mhm.
I know he was like handsy on defense, getting hands on balls, but I think JD's ability to just like run the pick and roll and throw lobs, like that's an NBA ready skill with like his athleticism as well to kind of like midair decide between throwing the lob or putting in a floater or, having a shot at the rim. You just like can't teach that kind of stuff. And so I'd be surprised if like it's a Madar over, JD.
Yeah, that's where you said it, where I was thinking too, is just he has JD over him, has a legit NBA skills that he could bring right away. Um, I just don't think I see Madar sticking here. I mean, you never know what they think of him. They obviously watch more international tape than I do, but every time he's come over here, I've been impressed about his physicality at that size. He's got some athleticism that pops off on the tape, and truthfully, I think that that's something the Celtics really miss out of some role players, and it feels like a lot of teams have those guys that can come on the floor and just shake the game up with energy, effort type plays. And
Javante Green.
yeah, I mean, I would have loved having Javante on this team. That would be perfect. I don't know if he's still injured or what, but yeah,
He is.
someone.
What's going on with the Bulls doctors, man?
I don't know
Jeez.
what's going on over there. Poor Lonzo, man.
I
I'm
know.
sorry to hear all that, but Yeah, I mean, I know I'm sort of getting off topic, but it's
Mate, that's all. That's what
yeah,
the last segment's for.
yeah. I mean, the Celtics, there's just times where it feels like our guys are so skill oriented that they could really. I'm not saying they need Aaron Nesmith and they shouldn't have made that trade. Obviously, that's not how I feel. But having a guy that's kind of got that erratic hustle, athleticism spark like a Nesmith is something that this team could use because, their guys that check in off the bench are Grant Williams, Sam Hauser, Malcolm Brogdon. None of these guys are, um, catch a pass, lane to the rim, dunk on your head with a big man rotating. That just feels like a hole on this team that I don't know where they fill that, but obviously that's not what Muscala was when they brought him in. You know what I mean? It just feels like they're lacking sort of that real energy guy that a lot of
Yeah,
teams do have that can at the same time that can kind of meet what those other teams bring. Like, when we face a team like the Magic, they're all youth and energy. Where do we get that kind of punch to come back at them? And typically it's been Rob, but we can't always count on him alone to do that.
yeah. Look, I that's where maybe Johan Begerin fits in. Like
That's
that's
what I'm
six.
kind of getting at.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
yeah,
sort of
right.
built that mold for me. Yeah.
And I call him the French Jalen because when he gets out in transition, right? Like he's a great finisher in transition. He's got a nice handle out there in the open court, and like that's all they need from like that bench guy is like generate some turnovers, get out and run, like let's get moving. And so I've always really liked him. 6'6" guy with some athleticism and skill, like and the shot, and that's why he's a draft and stash because he's the shot's a question mark, and things like that. So yeah, great question, and I haven't really thought about Madar and Begaron too much, but it's good to know that people are still keeping an eye on them, and people think that they've got a shot. Like it just feels like Brad in general is running like an all-encompassing great organization right now. Like obviously the Celtics are having an amazing year. The main Celtics are just like every time I see a box score or a post, it's like Celtics win by 40, JD Davison triple double. And then it's like I see a post about Madar and Begarin like being a good draft stash combination. It's like, yeah, look, maybe JD and Fiondu and Madar, or maybe none of them turn into NBA players, but like the process from Brad, I really like, right? Like the athleticism, taking shots on second contract guys. I just I love Brad. President Brad. He can run my country if he would like.
Yeah, amen. I mean, speaking of Maine, real quick, it kind of feels like the guy we're waiting on, our 15th man, is Mr. Tony Snell that's sitting down there. I think
Yeah.
that was a nice little security blanket
Sneaky.
that Brad brought him in there just in case they couldn't find a trade, they couldn't find a buyout market pickup. So that has been kind of my thinking that's the guy that's going to come up. And honestly, I think that's a great addition as the last guy on your bench.
Tony Snell. What a guy. Look,
Mhm.
and that's all you need, right? A vet that can come in and
Mr. 000.
That's
in the
right.
flesh.
That's all we need.
Mhm.
Just someone to space the floor just a tiny bit. Yeah, no, I really like it. Look, we should probably wrap it up here.
Mhm.
Now that we're on to Maine and Johan Begaron, which I love. I
Yeah,
can sit here
it's
all
been
day.
a slow week.
Yeah, yeah.
We've
I
had
know.
one day off of
Exactly. I
something.
know. One day off, and we finally got a win. Look, any predictions for the Hawks game tomorrow?
I'm hoping for some good energy. Another win would be great. Um, yeah, I mean, just come out with the right attitude. That's all I ask. Meet them. I think you can handle the Hawks pretty easily. Just keep Trey in check, keep DeJounte in check, and it should be good.
Yeah, look, the offense, this is what I love about this stretch of games as we go into the playoffs, as I've mentioned, like not a lot of good defenses. Blazers, Hawks, Rockets, those are the next couple. Let's get this offense back on track. That's what I want to see.
Yep.
And it's focus, but as to quote the Joe Mazzulla, commitment to our principles, paint touches, spreading the ball. And look, I can see it kind of being a high scoring affair, but it would be nice to keep Trey in front of us and not get cracked off the dribble too much. as we get through that one. Alrighty, Nate, it's been an absolute pleasure. And again, follow Nate on Twitter, NEIGHT. Same with the YouTube channel on YouTube. Is that right?
Same
Yep.
thing. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, like awesome follow. He's like first to post all the clips, get the vibes rolling on the timeline, which we need. And we got a lot of negative Nancy's on Celtics Twitter these days, and Nate's a positive voice out there. And one more reminder: we're moving from the Celtics blog to the CLNS feed. So follow the First to the Floor podcast feed. Go right now to your Spotify. Take you 7 seconds. Search First to the Floor. Subscribe as we move away from the Celtics blog feed, so you can keep hearing these awesome conversations as we transition. Nate, it's been a pleasure. Go Celtics.
Absolutely.